Consistent self-improvement, everybody. You are now listening to American gypC Podcast. I'm your host, Classic, and I'm here with my co-host,
gypC, and today we have special guest Jenn Junod. She is the host of Shit You Don't Want to Talk About podcast, which is one of the most creative names for a podcast. I love it. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so excited to be here, and I love your show. So I am just grateful to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. We appreciate you coming on. So to get started, tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you or where you are now and how you got into podcasting.
Whew. That is, you didn't know it, but that's a pretty in-depth answer. I grew up all over the U.S. So in short, I went Arizona, Idaho, Colorado, Arizona, Indiana, Arizona, and I am now in Denver, Colorado again. Well, a suburb. And that answers where I'm from. I only say it that way because so many different parts of the U.S. really influenced who I am today. So it's hard to just say, hey, till I was the age of 8, I was in Arizona, then till the age of 18, Idaho, because you still grow after you turn 18 or become, I say a quote unquote adult because I turned 34 tomorrow and I'm like,
okay,
am I an adult? Like I know by age I'm an adult, but I'm not sure if I'm like, feel like I'm an adult. So
early happy birthday.
Thank you. I got into podcasting actually a very interesting way. We'll go with that as the adverb or verb to describe it. I have a very, very toxic father. He is a narcissist. He is gaslights. He is basically what I like to call a failed con artist, meaning that we moved around from small town to small town where he would get started at a company. And then within 6 months, they would fire him because they would realize he didn't know what he said he knew. And he caused a lot of turmoil in our family. Yet I grew up thinking that if I did X, my dad would love me more. If I did this, I could get his love. I'm just not enough. And there was one stint in high school after my parents' divorce that I lived with him. And I wish I listened to myself then because I moved out for a reason. But at the age of 25, I listened to him again. And he always said, Jen, if you move in with me, I'll help pay for school. And school was not something that I could afford. I was working full time and was still barely getting by. And so a totally different story with where I was working there caused me to quit very abruptly after 6.5 years. So I was like, hey, Dad, I'm going to move to Indiana. I had never been there. It's Northwest Indiana. So it's about an hour and a half outside of Chicago. And I moved out there, and between all of the lies just showing up, I ended up almost filing bankruptcy because he didn't keep up his end of the deal, and I just kind of had to wing it. So I went into collections for everything. It was very, very not awesome experience, yet
human.
It taught me a great lesson. Yeah. And that was when Robin Williams died. He was on a podcast. I didn't even know what podcasts were at this point. It's 2013, 2014. And my dad's like, you should start a podcast. You love Robin Williams. You love mental health. You should start a podcast. And I did. By 2016, I ended up launching my first podcast. It was called Greater Than. My co-host was in DC, and by that time I was in Arizona. So we did it via Skype before it was cool. So now we're doing it virtually, but back then nobody knew about Zoom or Skype or anything. So it was lessons learned from that podcast called Greater Than. And we talked about homelessness, sex trafficking, disabilities, racism, the caste system in India, um, what it is like to be traveling as a Black man throughout the rest of the world. That was one guest we had. I absolutely loved him. Racial biases. We talked about the shit you don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And that is how I came up with the title for the new show, because I never thought I could start my own show. I never thought I was worth it. That was something I had struggled with for so long. And being able to finally start the show is starting to change the stigma behind mental health, behind all these really hard topics that we don't talk about, and how to start having these conversations openly and changing shit you don't want to talk about into shit to talk about, which is purposely why that's our website name, why that is all of our social media names, why that's my company name, because it is so important for us to start having these conversations.
Yes, I agree.
Reading through your bio, like you went through a lot of stuff and you on purpose kind of talk about really hard topics. Is that triggering for you, or is it therapeutic for you to get some of your experiences out there?
Great question. It is definitely something that can be triggering. And that's something that I've had to learn as a host, like how to navigate when I ask a question or have a guest that actually later in a week or two, I'm going to be a guest on for the second time on another podcast because they want me to come on and talk about rape. And I am going, well, yeah, that happened. You want me to talk about that? So that's going to be cool. Yet I am that person that's like, jumping out of a plane seems terrifying. I'm going to go jump out of a plane. And I went skydiving because, that's where my logic goes. So I lean into those triggers quite a bit when it comes to publicly or people that are basically not my significant other. Where my triggers personally show up most are in my relationship with Tyler, because a majority of the trauma I went through happened with the people that I trusted the most. So he ends up dealing with me working through a lot of my triggers and a lot of my trauma instead of the general public or my therapist or, a friend, because yes, they do happen. Believe me, I have broke down crying at work before. Yet it's when I spill a cup of milk that I freak out that the world is doomed. I'm not anything. Nothing is going to work. Literally, the world is going to explode. And somehow I caused it all, which logically doesn't make any sense. None of this makes sense. Yet that's where my trigger will show up if I get triggered from a guest, majority of the time. Yet it is something that I think so many of us have to learn, like, how do our triggers show up? And do we lean into them? Or do we get a therapist to work through them? Or do we have to accept ourselves as we are and be curious about it, yet go, yeah, I'm not ready for that. I'm just going to leave that on the shelf for later because I need to work on the present right now.
Have you ever had therapy?
Yes. I have had both spectrums of the therapist. Of my mother. So my dad was physically abusive and emotionally abusive to my mother. He did classic narcissist and gaslighting things, such as he isolated her from everyone, absolutely everyone. I was the sole human left in my mom's world. Like, for example, my father's stepmother has a cabin here in Colorado. And he would tell my grandmother, hey, my mom and I can't go because they don't want to. They don't like the cabin. They don't like the outdoors. They don't like this side of the family. They hate you, and vice versa. He would tell my mom and I, your grandparents hate you. They don't want you at the cabin. It's not children friendly. So he started creating all of these rifts that when it was just me and my mom, when he left us when I was 12, he wiped my mom's bank accounts. Like, my mom had to work extremely hard, and she is such an incredible human, overcoming what my dad put her through. Yet it's taken time, in the fact that, especially when my dad left, all of her anger and hurt and not knowing what to do because she was so isolated turned on me, where she became very physically and emotionally abusive, with examples such as, I'm the reason that they got divorced. I'm the reason that my dad left. I'm the reason my mom has to work so much because I cost so much. There were other things like, I'm fat and I'm ugly and I'm a slut, and like, I don't deserve to go to school. I don't deserve to, basically, you name something cool, I don't deserve to do it. And I mention all of those because during their divorce, my dad, the master manipulator, made it so my mom and I had to go to therapy, and the therapist didn't believe me. I was cutting and he didn't care. I told him about how abusive my mother was. He didn't care. He told me I was making it all up. I went to the police station. I ran away to the police station to try to get help, and they gave me back to my parents. I had told multiple, I personally am not religious. It is something that I'll probably be battling with my entire life. Yet I would tell people in the church what was going on, and they didn't care. It was a blind eye. I grew up when this was all happening, it was a smaller town. So my mom had a lot of clout, and my dad was great at manipulating people, but these were all people that weren't around him enough to know the real him. That I literally had nowhere to go. And that was my first real experience with therapy. And in 2020, I had a craniotomy. So picture a cyst like that, this big, like size of a golf ball, golf ball. That's what we'll go with. I have multiple arachnoid cysts on my brain. I was born with it. My mom had me have MRIs when I was a kid. And because my skull actually formed around it, one of them, which is very abnormal. Normally, they do not cause your skull to restructure. So they were like, arachnoid cysts, those are normal. Don't worry about it. She'll grow out of them. So fast forward, actually 30 years. I think exactly 30 years. That's a little creepy, but I would get pressure headaches where I would have to press my hands so hard and see if it would help. Or I would wrap a bandana around my head and tie it so tight to make the pressure go away, but it would suffocate the rest of my head, that I had to take it off because it was causing other pain. Or I would lay down and put like books upon books on my head, basically anything heavy to make pressure on my right temple. And there was even a time where I was driving, and luckily my sister just started working with me because she knew I was so stressed out. She needed a job. So she was like, I'll contract there and help you out. So she was staying with me so she could, while we went to work, and my vision went completely blurry and the pain came on. And it was because of one of these arachnoid cysts. And I had to have a craniotomy for it. So they created like a tunnel. Like it's basically a scar tunnel is the best way to say it, because they can't permanently drain it. It's always going to cause fluid. But if they create like a tunnel to an area that already has brain fluid, it's like, cool, I'm going to be a lake going into the ocean. Done. I'm like, you guys created a river. Great. Thanks. Cool. Yet on the right side of your brain, this is where all your long-term memories are. Mm-hmm. Everything I thought I worked through, everything that I went to multiple self-development courses, I became suicidal again. I would go to a crowd. I was working at a production company at the time. I planned a huge event of my best friend's coffee company needed content, and I knew videographers. So I got the coffee trucks and the market that they would go to on Saturdays to get a ton of people to show up, to have us have the content to rehearse, to be able to get them amazing content. Like literally all of these people are my best friends. Like this is my jam. This is my community. And they all showed up, and I'm there and I go, I have no one to orbit around. Like I don't have anyone to that's my safety, because they're all busy. They're all getting different shots. They're all, step-ins, and I'm just there. And I walk away just bawling, because I was like, I'm here and I'm worthless. That's where I'm at. And I'm like, how does that make sense? I planned all of this in 3 days. This is like normally like a $50,000 set. And I got it for a win-win for both companies for free. All my friends showed up for free. Like, why am I so upset? And that made me find out that I never dealt as deeply with my mental health as I thought I did. I always thought I did. I always posted about like any anxiety I had. It's always been a passion. Yet that event made me start going to a psychiatrist, and I started going, okay, you guys are telling me I'm bipolar type 2 and ADHD and anxiety and depression. And I started getting on my medications, which did help. Yet I didn't start going to therapy yet. And so I started what's called EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization repetition. I really need to put this like on a sticky note on my computer, because I never remember what it stands for.
Never heard of it.
And it's helped me so much in the last year. And because my craniotomy was November of 2020, I started therapy in June of 2021. And going through all of this made me start Shit You Don't Want to Talk About in November 2021. I know I just told you guys a lot.
How did you, as far as, what were some of the things that, I guess, even that you used to kind of help you to stay grounded in those moments when you had that, I guess you could say, imposter syndrome or frustrating moments? What do you feel helped you kind of the most?
I would say all the tools in my toolbox can't always help. I say that because one of the biggest things that helped me is thinking about your 5 senses. So if I'm going into a panic attack, going, okay, what is something I can see? What is something I can smell? What is something I can touch? What is something I can taste? And what is something I can hear? And saying it loud, because it helps you become more in the moment, which anxiety is normally very future based of a what if, not always what is currently happening. And that does help. I do mention that my tools don't always help because my deep breathing doesn't always help. The five senses doesn't always help. What helps keep me safe, and this is something that I didn't always have, and something that has taken time to develop, is Tyler, my partner. We've been together about 4.5 years. He always made me promise that if anything happened, no matter what happened, I have to tell him. Don't ask me why. It's like still like ingrained in my brain, but he got it there. And I'm so grateful, because when we get in really bad fights, which I mean, all couples get in fights, I'm the one that will leave. I'll turn off my phone and leave. And he'll call me nonstop when I turn on my phone. I'll have multiple voicemails, and he's like, I just need to make sure you're okay and come back home. I know you're mad at me. We don't have to talk about it. I just need to make sure you're not going to harm yourself. Because he knows that I turn it inward. He knows no matter how many good days I have, I talk about this on the podcast, that if something hits me hard enough, it's hard not to return to patterns that I know. It's hard not to blame myself. It's hard not to go back to the episode that I just listened to. Is it Makta? Absolutely beautiful episode, and I loved her episode. And something that she mentioned was being told as a young child that you can do anything. And I was like, that is so beautiful. And I wish everybody had that. Yet there are times where I was always told from a little kid during solitary confinement that I could never do anything. And yes, logically now I totally know I can. I got this. Like, you give it to me, I'll do it. Yet there are going to be downward spirals where I feel like it's my fault. I feel like I can't do anything. And I feel like I'm never going to make an impact on this world. So why am I here? I'm just harming people. And thank God for Tyler, because telling him, no matter how big the fight, he helps get me out of this. He's gone to therapy sessions to ask them, how do you get out of this shit? Because like as a partner, supporting this shit is hard. Yeah. So how do you get out of this? And he's probably the most magical human I've ever met. And one thing I do want to mention too is, as someone supporting people with mental health challenges, is no matter what happens to them, no matter what choices they make, it is not your responsibility. It is not your fault. It is not anything you can control. I say that because I have lost friends to suicide. We have had so many horrible massacres in the US, and there is a big difference between stupid white supremacists that are racist fucks, and then there's people that never got into mental health. And it's very hard to support people who are even working through it, because you can never quite know in what's going to work for everyone. It's not a one size fits all. It's going to your therapist, like you asked earlier, to learn tools in your toolbox. It's listening to podcasts like these. I love how you've asked questions about, well, how did you get through this? And how would you handle this on your different guests? And I'm just like, dude, that like listening to it makes me go, oh, I should try that next time I'm in a similar situation, so I don't go to old patterns that I'm currently dealing with.
Yeah. I appreciate you for saying that you get that from the podcast. And that's one of the things that we hope that people do, get those little things or those big things from the podcast that we like to share.
I think that's something that is so cool about your podcast is, and like our learning as humans learn in general, is putting the content out. It doesn't matter how many people have the content out, you know, each person is going to say it a little different. Like, I have a podcast, I talk about random shit, and people could be like, you guys kind of have a similar podcast, or mine's kind of like yours. But the way you two say it and the way you two ask questions is going to be completely different to the way that I do. And it takes us as humans to hear it multiple times, to do it multiple times from different avenues. And I think that's such a beautiful part of your podcast. And I definitely need to get some swag. Like, just, I need to go buy some. Like, I'm currently like getting the podcast off the ground, entrepreneurship, like I'm jobless. You guys know how that can suck and also be amazing. So when I get a job someday or more money on the podcast, I'm buying some swag and I'm really excited.
We appreciate that.
We appreciate
it. Actually helps me. I used to smoke cigarettes, and I used to feel weird smoking cigarettes with the shirt on. I feel like people are looking at me like, I don't know. So it's always like a reminder. I like to tell people, you know, it's.
Yeah, and it is something I'm proud of, and we don't bring it up enough. But yeah, it's an accomplishment that a lot of people can't break, as far as even dealing with stopping to break cigarettes. You know, so even it, like I said, helps me. I feel bad that I'm not the gym junkie that I want to be sometime when I even wear it. But it is definitely a reminder of grateful to be alive. You have one more day. And, consistent self-improvement every day in every way, one day at a time.
I think that's a beautiful part about it, because constant improvement means accepting in my head, it means accepting us where we're at. Because I know for myself, I may have worked out for the day, which is great, and that's what I'm supposed to do, but I'm still gonna get that cheeseburger, like that cheeseburger and fries, or as I oddly order, I always get fries in a salad because I want to eat the shit out of the fries. I also just love salad, but they cancel each other out, and I'm like, I'm doing better than last week because I actually worked out this week,
But you're conscious of it as well.
Yeah, and it's a lot of going, okay, constant is like just accepting where we're at and going, okay, thank you for what we did today. We did it, and now we're going to grow, and we're going to continue and accept ourselves for who we are.
Yeah, and there's always room to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to ask, what were some of your childhood dreams?
I feel like I should warn people of a disclaimer. Any question you have is going to be a way more complex answer than planned.
We appreciate that. Yeah. We appreciate that other than just, I want to be a firefighter. And then leave it there. So.
I will say there was a point that I wish I was a ballerina. My parents actually got me a book with my name in it. I think I still have it to this day. I really hope I do, where it talks about Jenny becoming a ballerina and being on stage and winning the bouquet. So that was definitely something that was a dream. But in all honesty, my dreams as a child was just getting through shit. I went to solitary confinement, and we moved to another area when I was 8, and I wasn't locked in my room anymore. But then my cousin's sexual abuse started. So it was better than where I was, but it's not great. And then at the age of 10, I moved to a new area, and I was away from my cousins. There was no solitary confinement. But when my parents came home, I was constantly in trouble and would get the breadboard on my ass till I bled because XYZ didn't get done. So it's better than abuse, sexual abuse. It's better than solitary confinement, but I'm still going through all this shit. Then my dad left, so that abuse stopped. I'm 12, and cool, all that shit's gone. But now I'm working on, my mom's having to work constantly. I'm still getting in trouble for stuff and backhanded and punched and pushed into shit. but my dad's gone. So there's more happier moments.
Mm-hmm.
The age of 14 rolls around and I start to realize I can be promiscuous to feel loved. So, you know, I have more freedom. Yeah, I'm trying to find love in all the wrong places. I also have a lot more freedom, and I'm starting to realize, and it's starting to hit me, of how much I was being told how incredibly horrible of a human I was, that I started really having self-harm tendencies due to wanting to take it out on myself, give myself that pain. If that's what I'm being told, then I deserve all of this pain, is what I told myself. And then suicide attempts happened. One of my best friends died. I was raped. I dropped out of high school. I became homeless. I got married. I got divorced, and that takes me up till my 20s. So there's not a lot of time to dream. It was literally just
quite the nightmare.
Survive, but I have happy memories. I have friends, I call them my sisters, because I'm an only child, but these two women are my sisters. They're both such incredible mothers too. I'm never going to have kids. So like, I like being Auntie Jen. It's great. Auntie Jen is good. I like spoiling the kids and then leaving. And Kat, I met when our mothers were friends when I was in the womb. And when my dad would have pool parties, when I was locked away in my room, she would come around the side of the house and talk to me through the window. We're still best friends to this day. Like, I absolutely love this human. And Amory, I met in 7th grade. And her and I have been through some crazy shit, but she knew how I would get in trouble if the house wasn't absolutely spotless when my parents got home. And she would sneak into the house and help me clean, which is crazy because who does that? First off, I'm a horrible cleaner, so no one will ever hire me to this day as a house cleaner. She actually is a house cleaner at a hospital. Like, she knows her jam and she loves it. So she would sneak into my house and help me clean. And really funny, there was a time that my dad came home early from work and she had to step behind a door to hide from him. Like, he came into the room and she's behind the door, and he goes to the bathroom and she sneaks out the back door, and he hears me open the door and he's like, "What are you doing? Why are you going outside?" I'm like, "I'm letting the cat out," because we had a cat. And she would park her bike behind the garage and then ride it off through the alley. So he had no idea. But it's those two that bring the light memories. They're the ones who made life worth living throughout all of this shit.
So what is your opinion now, kind of based on spirituality and religion, or with as an adult today?
I would say the term God means something different to everyone. And that spirituality, see if I can talk, is so unique to each individual that it's a beautiful thing that as human beings, yes, there is so much hate in the world and so many fights over religion that tears so many people apart, yet we're learning to be more open to each other's religions and each other's views. I grew up LDS. I have a lot of problems with the religion, which I won't get into. I'll just end up going on a downward spiral. Yet I was so anti-religion until I was sent to Europe for work. for 3 months, and I spent time in Peru and learning, like in Peru, learning about how Catholicism came in and colonialized Peru, yet there's still, yes, there are very, very many Catholics, and it is a very, very prominent religion in Peru. They still have their original religions and cultures and practices, yet I find that so beautiful. Yet at the same time, I think it's very terrifying when we force religion on others, because, like, from at least what I learned while I was in Peru, is their indigenous languages are starting to go away because they're no longer being taught because Catholicism is taking over. And I say that because when I went to the UK and throughout all of Europe, I went to Germany, I went to Bulgaria, I went to Romania, to France, to Greece. Like, they have some of the most ancient, beautiful worship areas. Like, they have in Athens, in Greece, they have so many of the structures that were built.
The
Yet,
Parthenons.
yes, thank you. I'm totally spacing all of their names. And some of the greatest churches in the world are in Europe, and it was something that has made it a lot easier to deal with religion for myself and spirituality. Is colonialism started with Catholicism and has had many roots on man just wanting power. And knowing that as part A, and then knowing that I know so many humans that are Christians, that are religious, that are, they're not in it for the power, makes me go, okay, cool. Basically, some douchebags wanted everybody to follow them. And then there's a lot of really good people that do. So there's got to be some sort of truth somewhere. Like, I don't think everybody's going to be sheeples, and the same with other religions. Like, I have met many, many Muslims that are some of the kindest people that I've met, where I've had an interest in reading the Quran or a question about it. And they'll be like, yo, ask me whenever, or let me know if you have questions. And like asking someone why they're wearing a hijab. Like, or I have multiple women that are Muslim that are my friends, that some wear a hijab that covers absolutely everything. Some wear a hijab that only covers half of their head. Like, their clothing is so different, and they're open with me asking them questions why. And there are Jewish people that let me ask more about, like, the upbringing and, more about Hanukkah or their other holidays. And I think it is so beautiful and brings community to us. And if that's what gives somebody a higher power, if that's what brings somebody hope that there's going to be a greater thing in the world, why disrupt it because it's different than my view? That's my view on religion.
Yeah, and that's, a good point of view to have an understanding. You're open, I guess, with, and that's for us. I'm more spiritual than religious, even though I grew up in the Christian church. But when, to be more open-minded, or even just to wonder, have the freedom, to not be stuck in one in particular religion. And like you say, for yourself, you're able to look at it from a student point of view and ask about each religion without any type of judgment, more just with a learning, sense. And that's, a lot of people can't do that. Some, religious people, or you could say some Christians, they don't want to learn more about what's going on in the Muslim religion or in any other religion. They just more focus on, Christianity. And sometimes that creates almost kind of like a biased view towards other religions. But spirituality is, of course, that's overall, you're working with your heart. You're just overall, you're vibrating off love, and you know the difference between, good and bad, and you can feel it. So,
yeah. And I feel like they're all trying to interpret the same thing differently at the end of the day, because it's
some of them, not all of them,
well,
because a lot of religion is very responsible for a lot more war and death than
I was just thinking
yes.
that talking about like Catholicism and how it caused colonialism, and so much religion has caused hate and caused racism and has caused I don't know what it is, religiousism. Is that a thing? I don't know if that's a thing, but
we'll take it.
That it's like it shows up in politics, it shows up in church, it shows up in companies fighting for the same space, and it's like, cool, bro, like there is enough space for you to you can be the best human possibly. Do you over there? I can still be the best human, and there's space for both of us. So why can't we like all figure that out and be friends?
Yeah, and we should be able to. You have a question?
No, I guess I want to open it up to if you have any questions for us.
Because we can get into the I guess podcast wise and kind of crank up from 2020. How has things been, your experience been since 2020 and having the podcast, and what are some of the challenges that you face with it?
Great question. I would say having a podcast and entrepreneurial spirit, and I am very fortunate that the tech world makes enough sense to me that I get hired at very, very techie companies without fully understanding what they're about, but they keep hiring me, which is cool. Yet you could almost say that it completely clashes with the podcast, because my biggest thing as a human is I love human connection. Like I have such a curiosity about humans and love connecting two humans together. Like, hey, you kind of like pizza. Well, this person likes pizza and you like the same pizza. So you guys should be friends, because that's just going to be fucking amazing. Like you guys are friends. And it's something that shows up in whatever job I've had. Been in sales, I've been in leadership, I've been in project management, I've been in training, and I like them all because they create human connection, yet it's not 100% my passion. Where the podcast is like, I can put in so much work and so many hours, and I absolutely love talking about this shit. That's the best way I can say it, is talking about shitty topics is like, that is honestly my passion. Literally, we do have an episode about gut health where we talk about shit, like the literally poop.
That's important.
But it's because talking about these really difficult conversations help us connect more as humans, and our shame and our guilt and our isolation, even before COVID, that's how we all functioned. If you think about the quote unquote perfect 50s family, 2 kids, mom staying at home, dad's working and never home and probably an alcoholic, Jimmy and Jane are out doing stuff, and God forbid Jane gets pregnant at 16, the world's gonna die. So it's talking about that stuff because this shit happens. Why do we have to shame Jane for wanting to be a sexual human? Why do we have to shame Jimmy if he wants to, he wants to identify as non-binary, or if he's gay? Why do we have to have dad work nonstop when mom wants to do fucking makeup and show up in the world and be an entrepreneurial boss? Like, we put so many stigmas on people and we never talk about it. Like, I, in a million gajillion years, and I think this is something that I love the most about the podcast, is talking to people that I can never imagine somebody else's experience. None of us can.
Right.
But in a weird way, I love bus chucking myself to ask the guest, why is this question bad? Why is this, for example, something that I've asked before, why is saying I'm colorblind to the differences between different races, why is that bad? Letting myself bus chuck, because people need to fucking change. And so many people are afraid of changing. So why not use what privilege I've been had? And if I can captivate people to listen, to start opening their mindset. Because we all have so many differences that we really need to hone in on that. And our differences are so fucking beautiful. Like, they are what makes us so amazing. Just how we talked about that your podcast may talk about the same topic I talk about, but people may click more with the two of you because it comes with two different hosts. Your ideas, your backgrounds are beautiful and different. And that's what makes it so important. And that's been the beauty of starting the podcast. Is I knew that at the beginning, but I was like, hey, should I do this? I don't know if I should do this. Like, I feel like nobody's going to listen if I do this. Like, this is cool. I'm really scared. Nobody's ever going to listen. And now it's like, yo, listen, because this shit's important. And it was so crazy. One of the things that I hired a marketing team because I don't know anything about marketing. I hate it with a passion. Okay, caveat. I do know stuff about marketing. I've actually worked in multiple marketing departments, but it's not something I enjoy and really clicks doing it for myself. So they were like, hey, Jen, you're into activism. You're an activist. And I'm like, I'm a what? They're like, you're an activist for change. And I'm like, I am. What? What are you talking about? And then it started to sink in that I'm so passionate about seeing this change, about showing our differences as beauties, showing our scars as our triumphs, showing our sorrows and knowing we're not alone as something that's really going to help us all be closer to one another, even when we just meet. And as the podcast has gone on, that's something that I've started becoming more in myself, because we each have like our own, like, I guess you could go on spirituality with this, but I feel like we do all have a frequency. It doesn't mean if you're religious or not religious, but if you're like more aligned with who you're meant to be, it's like the world's like, cool, I'm going to send more shit your way that's meant to be happening. Yeah, you're going to have a ton of challenges, but you're just going to know, like, you're going to meet more of the right people. You're going to have more of these opportunities. At the same time, you may also have way more struggles. I do not want to like miss on that. And it's where I started learning that more and more since I started the podcast, that I love my purple hair. I love sequins. It's a little crazy and a little much, but I love it because I love being able to bust chuck myself so other people can learn about the conversations they don't want to talk about.
Did it take time for you to build that courage to kind of bring all of yourself to the podcast, I guess? Because personally, sometimes I feel like I hold back on certain things. And of course, I'm just starting out. So I'm still kind of building the courage, I guess, to bring all of me to the table. But did it take you time to kind of, I know you deal a lot with difficult topics and things like that. did you build the courage over time to, I guess,
or
to
did
talk?
you just come straight out like boom?
Like
All
you
right.
said, I love
You're like,
sequins and I love purple hair and what, just say whatever you want to say and things like that. Like, did it take time, or was it just, you did the podcast because you felt confident enough from the
From
bat?
day one,
Yeah.
you knew that, all right, this is what it is.
No, 100%. Like, I had imposter syndrome coming on your guys' show because I like admire you two so much. I know I reached out to you guys and I'm like, they actually want me on their show. And like listening to some of the guests you've had too, I'm just like, they're doing so much cool stuff.
Oh, no.
And they want me on their show? What? And that still happens where I had a doctor on my show, meaning he had an MD and a PhD. And I'm like, what? You're on my show?
Yeah, I've had that.
We understand that. Yeah.
and that still happens. That honestly, yes, I knew more than anything I wanted to do this podcast, and I've pushed myself as much as I knew how at the time to be myself, because I have to remind myself that if I'm not 100% myself, it's not going to be the best it can be for the guest and for the audience. And from day one, and it still happens now, that I get stuck in my head. I go, oh God, did I fuck that up? And I edit them all myself, and I hate listening to myself. It's taken me time to go, okay, Jen, you've gained weight. It's okay. It's okay. Like, you've been going through a lot of stressful shit, but like, what are you doing to make yourself healthier, no matter what the weight? If you're going to stay that weight, that's cool. What are you doing to make yourself healthier? That stuff comes to mind a lot, because I know for myself, getting on stage, talking to an audience, if I want to see change in other people and I want to be an advocate for that change, I have to present myself as best as possible, which is not always dolled up and ready with sequins. A lot of times it's me showing up in a hot top bun and going, yo, let's record this shit. We got this. Or me rescheduling twice because of life or health issues. Or there was one guest that it took 4 months to get her on the show because we both had to reschedule for each other. It's letting go of, I really didn't like that person that applied, and I don't know if I want them on the show, and what do I tell them? It's so, in a nutshell, no, I still struggle with it. I still struggle being 100% on point me. And it's a practice of going, it's okay to be me. It's okay to show up as myself. And if I fuck up, I'll learn from it.
Yeah.
But it's a daily practice, I guess you could say.
Consistent self-improvement.
Yeah. Now you know why I want your swag. Possibly on a sequin shirt. I'm just saying, like, I'm going to be it.
We'll have to work it out.
I'm going to go a little off topic, and I want to ask you about the little plant back there next to the light.
The bamboo.
The bamboo.
That's what that is?
That is what it is.
Okay.
It's
how long have you had that?
I love the questions you ask, because you never know. Again, I should really put this as a caveat to people. That shit has a story. So I decided, I was in sales and leadership sales for, probably 12 years, where I was like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to become a videographer intern because I want to do this human connection thing. And, well, let's just say that was not a great move, yet I learned a ton, because in October 2019, I started full-time at a production company, and I was making a quarter of what I've made since I was like 19. And I was treated like shit. My boss was a narcissist. Because of COVID, we ended up doing the digital conferences because we couldn't do in-person production. And I was the only one with tech experience. So I ran the account management, helped the client plan the event, help the web developer game plan how we're going to make the system do what they were promised. Because my boss, even though I would tell the client this is not possible, my boss would straight up lie to them and tell them it was. And which there was a deadline of, we needed to do a conference in different languages because it was a global conference. And my boss said it was possible. And the day of, it was like literally the shittiest thing. The client was outrageous at it because my boss was too afraid to say, yo, we can totally do it, but it's going to be another $7,000. So I'm making basically minimum wage. I'm constantly being like told I'm crazy because my boss keeps telling the client shit that we can't actually do. Yeah, I'm the one in charge of planning it, putting on the event. Like, we had a production crew and they were amazing, like who would actually run the day of. Yet I'm still in charge of the client and all of the breakout rooms and everything that. So like, I'm in charge of all of this. And then I would spend like 24 hours being up because we would have a conference in Korea and then we would have a conference in New York. And I was the only one that knew how to do it all. So I mentioned earlier that my sister came in and helped me go to work and work with me. That was there. It was when I was having the insane headaches. When I would have the migraines, I used to get into yelling matches with my boss of saying, I deserve to make at least $100K with the shit I have to put up with. Like, I've never gotten in screaming matches with the boss before, but we literally would get in screaming matches with each other. And she was very gaslighting and narcissistic because she would do so much shit. Yet when she would show up, she'd be like, oh, well, I made time specifically for you today. No, she didn't. Like, it's a way of manipulating someone. I should have known because every meeting I had just to get the internship, she'd move while I was sitting in the office waiting for her for the appointment. Like, I should have fucking known, but I didn't. Anyway, all of that is to say, there's some weird thing that says for a bamboo to be lucky, you can't buy it for yourself. And she bought that for me. The boss, that was an absolute shit show, one of the worst jobs I've ever had, yet I learned so much that helps me in every single job I've had since. It helps me with the podcast. It helps me with the API meetup in Denver that I help out with. It helps me with every job I've had that I go, I am so proud of the growth I've had. And that bamboo shows it because it's been the first plant I've been able to keep alive ever. And I've had it for almost 3 years now. 2 years. It's 2022.
I wanted to ask, has it grown much?
Yes. So it's almost touching South Africa, the bottom of South Africa.
Okay.
And I don't know if you guys can see that.
I can see it. I think.
Yeah, I can see
okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay. That you can't see the full map. And it used to be about where the stalks are. That was it.
Okay. Yeah. I have one. Well, we have one that we've had for a few years, but I'm starting to see the most growth this year. And it's weird, yeah. But this spring, it started.
I'm
blossoming.
Curious. And how have you seen the growth in your relationship and your business in the last year?
Well, I could say maybe. Well, we've always seen growth and things. That's why the podcast is here now. Yeah. But since then.
But he felt like in the last 6 months or since spring, it has
it started
really
growing,
skyrocketed.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a lot faster than, because I felt like it was kind of, it was growing a little bit, but there weren't a lot of leaves popping up over the past 2 years. And now there's like a little stem coming out of the side of it. A lot more leaves are blossoming. And yeah.
I call it money tree. That's what I didn't know why I called it money tree.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I call it.
Yeah. We bought full-grown money trees because I thought they were so cool, and they died. They died very quickly. They got a bug, literally. Yeah. But I try to keep track of like what plants our pets can be around, because I found out the hard way that calla lilies used to be my absolutely favorite flower, and I had a cat that decided to eat them. And
they're not good for
passed
cats.
away.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So now I try to pay. So bamboo and money trees, that's why I talk about it, are safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's been an amazing conversation, and we've really enjoyed the positive energy you've given to us today. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Before we getting ready to close out, could you leave the audience with any information, like where they can find your links and different things like that?
Definitely. And thank you for having me on the show today. To reach us on any social media platform, so TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and y'all can totally follow us on Twitter and make fun of me trying to tweet, because you'll see a huge difference from marketing tweeting stuff and me tweeting stuff, but I'm getting the hang of it. It's shit2 talk about. And that's also our website where you can check out all of our previous episodes, submit to be a guest. It's shit2 talkabout.com.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, we appreciate you and the positive energy and you sharing your story with us.
If you're ever in LA, definitely stop by for a live studio recording.
Yes, we'd love to have you again.
I really want to. I was jealous because I was watching other episodes and I'm like, I want to be in studio. That looks so cool.
Yeah, we're always looking at ways to move the studio around for different recording and things like that. So
I love that you two do this together. It is definitely, you bring magic because you bounce so well off of each other.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It's something we're still working on.
Yeah.
I had my first interview you may have seen with Iron Addicts Gym with Samson. And one of the first interviews of realizing she's not there, so I had to adjust, but she was still sitting on the side, so having to do the co-producing from behind the camera still. Yeah. So it's even on camera and off camera. It's still the teamwork. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners, you can find us at AmericanGypC.com. And you can find consistent self-improvement merch at luamlee.com.
And we also have music under Classic, KLACCIK, CARPENTA. That's on Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, YouTube, and all major platforms. Thank you to our listeners, our viewers, our supporters, our donators, those that comment, share. We appreciate all of the support. Consistent self-improvement to everyone, and peace.